The Jefferson County Post would like to welcome Jefferson County Mayor Alan Palmieri, who is sitting down to talk to us. We appreciate you coming and letting us come in and talk to you about some things that are going on in the county right now, Mayor.
Thank you, Kristen. It's always good to have you.
Let's start right off with Monday's meeting. The County Commission met on Monday to address the 2015-2016 budget. And to say that the meeting was interesting would be speaking mildly, I think. There were two different philosophies going into this meeting. The budget committee brought a proposal for a zero tax increase, but some seriously deep cuts into a lot of county departments, nonprofits. Pretty much nothing was off the table as far as county goes. And then there was a philosophy coming in that the county cannot survive without at least some form of a tax increase. First of all, can you tell us kind of where you were weighing in on that issue for those who don't know?
Thank you for the question, and you framed that extremely well, because there are two divisions that we had to face. The one with no property tax increase, my position on that is simply this: there are things that we have to do as elected officials that we don't want to do, that's regrettable, but we were elected by the people to do a job. I'm not interested in playing politics. I never have. I've been in political office for over 25 years. I've never made a comment, a statement, cast a vote, or made a presentation based upon political whims or being reelected. This is no different. We're in serious trouble in Jefferson County financially, and to ignore it simply is to hinder future generations. And by future generation, I'm talking about next year on. Jefferson County is deep in debt. Right now, we have over $83 million in debt that we have not made provisions to cover or pay for. It's just hanging out there. That's irresponsible. So my position was, number one, there is no fluff. Some of the commissioners, I think even the chairman, Carmichael, said they're not cutting services, they're cutting fluff. That's simply not the truth. There is no fluff that we have in these operations that they're cutting. They're all going to damage and hinder services to the residents of this county. For just an example, and I won't go through each of them because it'd take too long, but take 911 for example. 911 is the only emergency service that handles every police call, every fire call, every emergency call from every resident, from each of the police departments, every one of the fire departments, every resident lives here, and everybody that drives through our county. They handle well over 100,000 calls a year, and they've had the same number of employees since 1996. You just cannot continue to handle the additional growth in volume. Everybody else, every police department's added manpower, the sheriff's operation adds manpower, fire departments are expanding. That's fine because it's needed, but what about the 911 operation? They can't continue to handle the calls. We have ambulances that have over 300,000 miles on it. How are they going to come pick somebody up and take them to a hospital? So the cuts that are being made are damaging to the people. I did propose a 10-cent property tax increase, not only to cover the cuts that County Commission could not figure out how to handle, but also to put a Band-Aid on the bleeding, because we've been robbing our fund balances to the tune of over $7 million over the last 4 years. That is totally irresponsible to be running an operation on borrowed money and not making provisions to pay back the borrowed.
One of the things that you talked about were some of the specific areas, and I know that in the meeting Monday evening, you made the case that some of these cuts will not only damage, but could shut down certain departments. Which departments besides 911? The departments came basically out of 5 or 6 areas.
Right.
Now the way I understand it is these cuts were on top of the 3% cut that all the departments did.
Yes.
Then they went in and they made some other further cuts to certain
Right.
areas. So tell us which departments we're talking about being heavily impacted besides
Sure.
911.
And let me give you a real life example, what we're looking at and considering right now. Well, when we talk about cuts, first of all, you had mentioned the 3% cut. It's important for the public to know and the residents to understand and know that the 9 years that I have been mayor, each and every year we have cut budgets. It's not that we have never cut. Some people have the misconception that we've operated Jefferson County government and keep adding to it. I'm the first one to stand up and oppose big government. I'm opposed to adding to government. What we're trying to do in Jefferson County and what we've done since I've been in office is provide services, not expand government. So when we're talking about the 3% cut, we get a budget and we present it the same as it was last year. Well, we have inflation. Gas goes up, electricity goes up, insurance goes up, but yet we're eating that. So we are already having a budget cut because we didn't provide enough money to cover those increases. On top of that, we gave a 3% cut. All the departments, every one of them went in and cut 3% from their budget. So that's like almost a total of a 6 to 7% cut. So when commissioners say you didn't cut or certain departments didn't cut, that is a fallacy. Any department reports to this office is cut for 9 years straight. Some do not have enough money to buy a pack of paper to operate. The offices that are going to be impacted, for example, and here's an example. One county commissioner told me that our building department, he checked, and he said that the building department only issued 42 new building permits in a 45-day period. That's less than one building permit per day. Well, that's true. There were 42 permits in a 45-day period. However, these commissioners wanting to cut operations, they don't understand or know what they're talking about. Because when a permit is issued, let's go through the steps on one permit. First of all, somebody has to receive a phone call or receive a person walking into the office. That individual is then informed of the procedure, the rules, the regulations, and the laws of obtaining a permit for Jefferson County. They're handed that, and it's almost like a mini conference as they go through it. Then that individual has to come back with their plans and the information to be in compliance before a permit is issued. Then a permit is issued, and the building inspector has to go out on that site physically and perhaps 6 to 8 times do a visual inspection and make sure that the construction is in compliance with our rules and regulations. So it's not just issuing one permit a day. There's over 200 to 300 visits and steps that have to be done. Now you get a commissioner who comes in and says, well, you only issued one permit today. But that's an enormous amount of work that goes behind that. Now they're going to cut that. They're cutting that office. So what that's going to mean that is somebody bringing in revenue to the county, which we're already in short supply on, is going to be told, well, instead of me issuing you a permit today, it may be 2 weeks. It may be 3 weeks. Before you can get your final approval, it might be 3 months down the road. County Commission has made a major step backwards. That's not an emergency service, but that's a revenue source for the county. So we need revenue, and they're cutting revenue. So they, in fact, have cut emergency services, and they're cutting operation services that provide a service to the residents of this county.
Is anyone going to lose their job?
Oh, very, very likely. There'll be several that'll be out of work. Service providers, not fluff. And I resent the term when the chairman and some of the others say that they're not cutting into the heart of the operation. They're cutting emergency services. They're cutting revenue sources for us. They are cutting the fundamental foundation that we have here in this county. It is not fluff. We've got vehicles on the road right now that are not safe. They couldn't pass an inspection. They refused to provide enough money for it. You all remember last year, we couldn't get $600 to buy a computer. Now, how do we operate some of these offices today without a computer? it's nonsensical to have people who are supposed to be legislators dictating what operations do. They're hurting the county.
Let me ask this question, because this is something that that I think people may not understand. In this particular budget, did they just cut the department, or did they cut line items? For example, does the cut have to come in personnel? Does it have to come in vehicles? Or can it just come from that department?
No, they have abused their power and authority of being legislators and becoming administrators, because they single-handedly picked salaries on some of the departments. They went in and some of it was done for just politically motivated positioning, not over understanding what goes on, because the department heads were never talked to about it. First of all, these departments report to the mayor's office. No county commissioner ever approached me about doing these things or the operations. Not until after the fact, a couple have asked questions.
In Monday's meeting, there were a couple of runs at trying to get a property tax increase. I think Commissioner McGraw, went for a 6 cent, which would have covered what was being dipped into fund balances. I think Commissioner Blevins did 10 cents, which was your proposal. The finance director in the past had said 8, and in that 8, I think he was counting the debt service, which they later found out can't be altered after it's been brought forward. Right. And none of those found enough votes. It was interesting because some people, some of the commissioners who actually obviously supported a tax increase, couldn't seem to find the number that they liked. You know, the ones who were voting for 10 cents couldn't go 6. The ones voting for 6 wouldn't go 10. And in the end, the budget passed as was presented by the budget committee, which had no property tax increase and these cuts, simply by 11 votes. It squeaked by. And so that shows that there's some back and forth on the commission as far as how they actually feel about these issues. I want to talk a little bit about what is included and not included in this budget. For example, the financial advisor, not the finance director, but the financial advisor, had talked about our obligations to the landfill and the fact that we have a deficit. Not only was the deficit not covered, was there any provision included in the budget for the landfill for future closure costs? In other words, have we even begun to address the issue?
Right. The answer simply is no. There were no provisions for it. If you look at the fact that, look at 3 aspects. Number one, we have a daily operation of county government, which includes the schools, the sheriff, the highway department, all the administrative functions that we have to provide. Then you have an existing debt structure. Like I said, we have over $83 million that we owe for and no provisions to pay for. We are operating a landfill, and by law, we have to have a set amount of money put aside to close that landfill when it's time to close it, and we've made no provisions for that. So that's millions more dollars that we've been totally irresponsible for. The problem stems, and the controversies we had during Monday's meeting, stems from the fact that we have a finance director and we have a financial advisor. And they have both informed the budget committees and the legislative body, county commission, don't do what you're doing. I have stood with the financial advisor and the finance director and said, no, don't do what you're doing. Here is an alternative. You may not like it, but it is responsible. And both financial advisor and the finance director have agreed with it. What happens is, and confusion continues to grow, when you have a political body that doesn't know squat about something, but they can get 11 votes and control the situation, and that's what we have in Jefferson County. They're not listening to the finance advisor. They're not listening to our finance director. These are the ones that have the expertise in their fields, and they make a presentation, they're being ignored. Our finance director is highly qualified and highly capable of handling the job here. He's dealt with billions of dollars, not a $90 million budget. And you can't get the majority to listen to them. They want to have their fingers in it, and it's almost like having an auto mechanic doing brain surgery. You wouldn't want that, but that's what we've got going on in this county.
One of the issues that Director Potts, the Finance Director Potts, had brought up was regarding the current debt service policy, which you said on the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee is a little bit different. It's made up of what I would call your major department heads, and then some members of the County Commission. And you all set financial policy for the county, which is separate from budget. It is the actual policy.
Right.
And you've all adopted a debt service policy. You were mandated to adopt a debt service policy. And right now, our debt service policy says we have to have 15%, a floor of 15% in our general fund. Now, Finance Director Potts says you're $80,000 off of that mark. That's all you got above that. And you're $135,000 in the hole that has not been addressed yet this year because of some budgeting issues from last year.
Right.
So that's going to require a change in the debt service policy. And that's something that he was not real pleased with having to happen. First of all, debt service policy is set, I guess you could say, when cooler heads prevail, not during the budgeting season.
Correct.
How do you see that going down? Because is it going to take 14 votes to change that?
It would, and it's a shame for it to even come up, because what we are actually doing is we're playing like Washington. They set policy and they set rules, and then if they can't meet them, all of a sudden, well, they change the rules instead of doing what's necessary to take care of it. The 15% that you're talking about is exactly right. Our debt service policy reads, and it was based upon CTAS, the state, and everyone else, that you cannot go below the 15% of your normal operating costs. That's where it's established from. That's a good financial policy to have. The Finance Committee adopted that. Now, because of the lack of fiscal responsibility on the part of the ones that get to vote, County Commission, they're saying, well, that's going to be hard for us to maintain. We're going to go ahead and just change the policy. That's wrong, and that's absurd, and that's Washington style. That's not the way we ought to be operating. We need to be held accountable, and we need to step up to this and say, listen, the new commissioners we have now, they've got a free pass. Why they don't take it, I don't understand. Why they don't say, listen, we didn't cause this problem. But it's a problem, and we have to do something we don't like to do. That's responsibility, and we don't see that. We don't see the leadership. We hear a lot of talk, but we're not seeing leadership.
I want to flash back for a minute. Way pre-you. The first major building program in Jefferson County when Jefferson County High School was constructed.
Right.
Now, understanding, of course, that times were different, properties were assessed at a much lower rate. But the tax rate in Jefferson County got up to $3.99.
Correct.
And I have had some people who have made the comment that people, though they didn't love that, they knew what they were buying into because they wanted the high school. We now have just gone through, a $57 million building program that was needed. We had schools that were falling apart, and there was some debate back and forth about different things, but in the end, you've got to pay for it in the end. Has there been any kind of tax increase to address that?
No, and that goes back to that $83 million, almost $84 million that I was talking about, that we had to issue bonds for, and that's above our operating expenses. That's just money out here that we had to get for the schools, and no provision at the time when the county commission said, we're going to go ahead and fix the high school, and we're going to build these new schools, and we're going to issue $57 million in bonds to take care of it. I said at that time, that's fine if that's what you're going to decide to do, but lay aside how you're going to pay for it. And some of the commissioners and some of the very ones that voted for it are on the commission today and on the budget committee today and said we can do it without raising taxes. That was a lie to the people of this community, and the people in this community that believe it were misled. You can't give away money that you don't have, that you have to borrow. when they gave away $53 million, and I don't mean just gave it away, it went to a good cause. It went to build the schools. At that time, it should have said, it's going to cost us X amount of dollars to pay off these bonds. They failed to do it. They failed the year after that, the year after that, the year after that, the year after that. They're failing to do it this year. Some of the commissioners we have right now have talked for years of the trouble the former commission got us into by not being fiscally responsible. And yet these same commissioners that know in their hearts that they need to do something about it refuse to do it. And some of them say, well, I gave my word. Well, some of them that have gave their words are no good to begin with. So it's hurting our people. I don't know how to get that point across. They will admit today that they're going to have to raise taxes next year. Next year, if they don't raise them that down this year, they're going to raise them upper double digits next year. And it's still not going to be enough.
That was a question I was going to ask you, actually. What do you anticipate next year's looking like? I mean, what do you think the tax increase is going to look like next year?
Presently, with this budget, we're going to be over almost $4 million in the hole next year before we even begin. So you can allow however many pennies that will bring in next year. And to be honest with you, I think to be fiscally responsible, if county commission does what they're doing this year with this budget, you're probably looking at a 30 to 40 cent tax increase next year, and that's a conservative estimate on my part.
I believe that when the building program was first brought forward, I think Mike Long was the director of finance then. That was 2 finance directors back. 47 cents, I think, was what he said. I know that at Monday night's meeting, in response to a direct question from the county commission, I know that Finance Director Potts said next year was going to be worse than this year, budget-wise. So you anticipate a very large tax increase next year?
Very large.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions for you. I guess the big question everybody wants to know is, are you going to veto this budget?
To the Jefferson County Post, because you've always been very fair and accurate in your reporting. Let me say that you're the first press source that I've said this to, but the answer is yes. I will veto the budget, and I will veto the tax increase. I have 10 days in which to sign the veto on that. We received the documents yesterday. I will take the full 10 days because there are other documents in there that I will review, but to answer your question is yes.
Given the differences in philosophies and the obvious struggle that some of these commissioners were having on Monday night, and the fact that this budget just got passed with 11 votes, do you think that there might be some people who reconsider during this time? Because there were obviously some of those commissioners who were looking at the possibility of some form of a tax increase. They just could not seem to find their number in there.
And I would hope that good common sense will prevail, and some of these commissioners will re-examine the stance they took. I hope they'll listen to the finance director. I hope that they will actually see that it's not fluff, but it's actual service to the residents and emergency services that are going to be cut, that the residents are going to be hurt, that it's irresponsible to continue on the path that we have financially, that it's not a pleasant thing to do, but we need to do what we're going to do to help bring about stability and bring back a former, stronger county than what we've had, so that we can move forward. Right now, with this budget, we're looking backward. We're not looking forward.
I thank you very much, Mayor. I know that this has been a stressful budget season for everybody. It's been definitely a lot of ups and downs, and a lot of hard decisions have been made. And I know that there are different philosophies regarding this, and I don't think that anybody has slept well at night while they were going through this, and I understand that this is just part of the process. But we certainly appreciate you taking your time to sit down and talk to us and explain to the people where we sit and what's going on.
Well, thank you, Chris, and I appreciate Jefferson County Post and all you do for our community.
Thank
it's
you
good to have
very
you.
much.